Welcome to our CRO forum today. Great to see so many of you here. As you know, we'll be spending the next couple of hours talking about the future of enterprise tech selling, and it's exciting to see that so many of you have turned up to join in on the discussion. For those of you that I haven't met personally, I'm Shruti. I'm a VP here at Sapphire Ventures, and I'm really excited together with the rest of the Sapphire team to be hosting all of you today. Before going further, a big thank you and shout out to our good friends at Bloomberg Beta for graciously hosting us and generously letting us use this beautiful venue. And I also wanted to quickly introduce and thank James Cham, who's one of the partners at Bloomberg. James, if you just want to say hello.
Sure. My name is James Cham. I'm a seed stage investor with Bloomberg Beta. Bloomberg is our only LP, and we invest in the future of work. And I just think the thing that strikes me as someone who's been in venture for a number of years is there's a point where we all told ourselves as venture capitalists that we'd have these amazing capital light businesses in which we would no longer need salespeople. And I think we've all seen that that's not true. And I think that this remains like the heart of the business of software, right? And so it's inspiring to have you guys here, and we're excited to see what happens next.
Thank you, James. So, I see many of you around the room that I know well, but for those of you that haven't had that much exposure to Sapphire before, maybe I can just talk briefly about who we are and the kinds of companies that we back. We're a leading independent tech-focused VC firm with close to $2.5 billion across different funds that we manage. We invest directly in expansion stage tech startups. And over the last several years, we've also expanded our investment strategy to taking a play in the early stage startup ecosystem by becoming LPs in a select group of emerging early stage VCs, primarily in the US, Europe, and a couple of other geographies. Through all those different investment vehicles, we have direct and indirect investments in over 700 venture-backed startups globally. And I hope this isn't too immodest, but since we're talking about sales performance and really preparing companies for the next big milestone, in the last 6 years alone, we've had over 44 exit events for our portfolio companies, which includes both IPOs and M&A. And we've consistently been ranked by CB Insights as one of the top 5 VC firms when it comes to the exit performance of our portfolio companies. And speaking of exits, here's just a quick snapshot of some of our exits in recent years. As we look at this, we're proud to have had a chance to back companies that have changed the face of enterprise tech, whether it's around infrastructure, sales and marketing technology, and beyond, but also companies that have started to sort of move into the consumer and enterprise space, really walking that line, companies like LinkedIn, Fitbit, and Square. When we're not out there meeting hundreds and hundreds of promising startups to identify the handful that we will fund and back, we also spend a lot of time working very closely with our portfolio companies to help them succeed in different ways. And there's a couple of different ways that we do that. Business development is key. So whether that's access to decision makers at the top tech titans that can become valuable channel partners for a lot of startups, we open those doors, we provide that guidance. Or whether it's access to CIOs and C-level tech leaders at Fortune companies that are looking to embrace startup innovation, we broker those connections and we build those networks for our portfolio companies, leading to major outcomes for them. And then, of course, we hold events such as the one today to really drive conversations around operational excellence and help build a community within our portfolio. So why this event? There's a few thoughts there and a few reasons why we thought it was really a good time to convene everybody for a conversation. There's something in the VC industry that is referred to as pattern recognition. VCs like to talk about patterns and their unique ability to recognize those patterns. And if we think about a lot of the companies that have been really successful in our portfolio, a lot of the companies that you recognize from that logo slide a minute ago, one of the patterns that's really clear is that one thing that unites those companies, whether it's LinkedIn and Fitbit playing on the more consumer segment, to Nutanix or MuleSoft or other companies playing in enterprise segments, is the obsession that they've had throughout, not only with achieving hyper growth, but efficient top-line growth and making the right trade-offs between growth, profitability, and customer success. So that's a topic that is clearly very key and a common opportunity and success metric across these companies. And we also feel that some of the rules of how you get there are slowly changing. So we wanted to drive a conversation around that. And secondly, if we look at SaaS operational metrics among SaaS cohorts, so groups of different SaaS companies, it's very clear now from all the research that it is substantially and dramatically more profitable to actually grow revenue from existing customers and upsell from within your existing accounts than go out there and acquire new accounts. Which is not to say that you shouldn't go out there and keep expanding your customer base, but we really feel that there is a lot of best practices and wisdom from the winners in our network and portfolio to be shared around how you get to that holy grail of land and expand, especially if you're going after the enterprise segment. And last but not the least, we as VCs and you as revenue leaders are probably no stranger to the fact that the landscape of sales tech and marketing tech startups, the majority of them venture-backed, is just exploding. Every year, analysts say, well, this space has reached saturation. We won't see as many new sales tech startups mushrooming next year, and year in and year out, that landscape keeps expanding. And while that's very exciting for innovators in those spaces that want to create valuable new companies, it poses a huge challenge for CROs that are being bombarded with a lot of new tools and technologies, and they really need to figure out which are the few that can help them move the needle and what's the noise. And that's another conversation that we wanted to drive through our portfolio. So we've crafted an agenda and convened a group of speakers and sales executives that will help us think through those themes and how the rules of a lot of those questions are changing. Our first panel, Scaling to Perfection, Oiling the Enterprise IT Sales Engine, will be moderated by Rami Pernitskiy of Sapphire, together with executives from SAP, Splunk, and Cloudera. We'll then have two mini panels moderated by Rajiv Dham from Sapphire as well, navigating and exploring different parts of the sales tech ecosystem. And last but not the least, we will have Nancy Hua, who's the CEO of Aptimize, talking about and leading a panel discussion around how we get to that holy grail of land and expand. And last but not the least, don't forget this, after all the serious stuff is over, there's cocktails and appetizers at True Norm 1 downstairs, so we expect you to stick around for that. This is just a quick look at who's in the room, so in addition to ingesting all the wisdom that's going to come out of the panels and the speakers today, look to your left and right and make sure to really get to know as many of your peers as you can today. A few quick housekeeping items before we move on. If you're tweeting, if you're looking at your phones during the event, we encourage you to just use our hashtag for the event, Future of Selling, and our Twitter handle. If you wouldn't mind, silence your mobile devices or at least put them on vibrate. Restrooms are out that door and to your left. And I believe that Wi-Fi credentials are right here on your badges. And without further ado, let me quickly introduce Rami Pernitskiy. Rami is one of the MDs at Sapphire. Many of you already know him, but for those of you that don't, Rami was previously CEO of Numenta, which is a known innovator in the machine learning space. Prior to that, Rami was an executive at SAP for several years, where he was managing director of SAP Labs. Before that, he led the global ecosystem and partnership organization at SAP. And prior to that, he was an executive at Top Tier Software, which was acquired by SAP in 2001. So between his hats as a VC, startup CEO, and a go-to-market executive at a tech titan, he's seen it all in terms of the do's.
You're too generous. Thank you.
Over to you.
Thanks so much.
And a quick reminder to the panelists to just switch on your mics.
Yeah, so why don't you join me, dear panelists, and good afternoon to everyone. Awesome to see so many faces. When we thought about this event, we wanted to provide people with a solid understanding of what it takes to build rocket ships and successful sales organizations. And when we thought about this particular panel, which is all about scaling the organization, when we thought about the panelists, we wanted to bring people who have experiences in both large organizations where they see best practices and invariably some worst practices, as well as startups, and really to have the empathy and understanding of what it takes on both sides. And with that, Lars from Cloudera has joined us. Richard, thank you for joining us from Splunk, and John McGee from SAP. And I'll let each one of you introduce yourselves and what you guys do, and then we can dive into some particular questions, and then we can open things up for a dialogue as well. So, John, with you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. John McGee. I run the West for SAP. Prior to that, I was the head of global sales for FireEye and Informatica.
Richard Campione. I'm Chief Product Officer at Splunk. I'm accountable for the end-to-end product lifecycle. I've had probably half of my career on the sort of sales and marketing side and half sort of on the product side. And most recently, I was the CEO of a SaaS company. But I know these guys from a larger company of that car.
Great. My name is Lars Nielsen. I'm currently the VP of Global Inside Sales for Cloudera. I got hired, though, 3.5 years ago as the VP of Sales Operations. So I have pivoted, I guess, my career at Cloudera as we've grown. Interestingly, I've typically done both sales operations and inside sales for most of the companies that I've joined. And some of you may have heard that we filed in our quiet period, but cool for me because I can reflect. I was able to do a similar journey with Portal Software, with ArcSight, and also, there's one more. So I'll reflect on my experiences in helping take very small venture-backed companies to IPO.
That's awesome.
Riverbed Technology.
There you go. So my first question, and maybe, John, we can start with you. My first question to you guys is, when a CRO or when you start building the organization and designing it for greatness, what are some of the attributes that you want to think about as far as a winning culture? I mean, you're going to be grinding it, quarter in and quarter out, and numbers aside, what are some of the great attributes of great sales engines you've been involved with?
So there's two questions, which one is, the culture itself. And I would say that's the most important aspect of a good sales team. And I think I'll reflect on myself early in my career, that was something that I didn't take full recognition of, or I didn't understand what the power of culture was. Sales reps and sales leaders, they certainly work for a paycheck, but they can get a paycheck anywhere, right? They will go that extra effort. They'll go to that wall for you if you have something unique in terms of a culture that other companies can't offer. What I've learned is the culture, of course, starts with the sales leader, but you have to show vulnerability in terms of who you are. Right? You have to be able to talk in terms of what is it you believe in as a person, what do you believe in as a leader, and to be able to share those values and to be able to get those values, kind of put into the sales organization. Once you have that, because if you think about it, if you're recruiting a sales rep into your organization, they're looking in terms of what is safe within the sales organization. And what you're doing with your core values is that you're literally communicating, this is what we stand for, this is where we're going to be able to go. And then from there, it's all the things that you'd expect, right? It's being able to the respect, the communications, and by doing that too, is we have a couple of signatures: never ever give up. Win as a team, right? That's a really, really big one. And then the other one is, effort is great, but winning is expected, right? And to be able to kind of go through those things over and over. If you go through any more than those three, you kind of dilute your message. Richard?
So building a bit on what you just said there, I think that complex deals, one of the best sales guys I knew, he said, complex deals, you're not going to bring it across the line until you've thought in your soul, I've lost this deal 3 times. So 3 times. That gets to never, never, ever give up, right? You've got to keep pushing. You've got to be optimistic. But when you get to that first and second time that this deal is going to fail, what do you need? You need help. And so if people are afraid to ask for help, or they're afraid to say, here's where it is, and open it up, then the team's not going to be able to pitch in and help, which is where this culture becomes so important. By showing vulnerability, you role model for everybody else that, hey, they can be vulnerable too. And maybe you made some mistakes, maybe this is going wrong, whatever it is, but the team should pitch in to help. All energy on helping getting the job done, not energy on CYA or avoiding this or this person or that kind of stuff. That all comes from culture. The last thing, maybe to tee you up, given your background, is as much as selling is an art, it's all a machine. And so figuring out what is the machine, the mechanics, the dynamics of your particular sales engine, that is vitally important. And if you can get that machine nailed, you can not only get your sales team executing, but you can plug in everybody else in the organization. And everybody in the organization is only there to make sales successful, to make the customers successful. So really understand your machine.
That's great. And so what you're saying is vulnerability is a way to become transparent as an organization and accountable.
And also to focus people's energies on what matters.
Yep.
I like this, I like Navy SEALs. And Navy SEALs have this idea of extreme ownership. And the idea is, it's all your fault. And I used to think that was kind of macho BS, frankly. Say, it's all my fault. No, it's not my fault. Other things happen out of my control. But the reason they say it's all your fault is because as soon as you own that, you put all of your energy into what you can control. And you don't distract yourself on anything else. And that's what you want the team to do. Put all of their energy into figuring out what's going on and how do we win, and not worry about the other stuff.
So all the companies that I've been involved with here in the Valley have been technology companies founded by generally younger, either design, product, or engineer types. And the companies all started as an engineering kind of focused or engineering-led company, and then they got to revenue, they went to market, and they started building an engine. And in all the companies that I've really succeeded in, there was an inflection point where the leadership team helped the entire company, which started as an engineering team, but then went to sales and marketing and HR and everything else, and helped everyone understand that we have to become a revenue-driven company, not a sales-driven company, but a revenue-driven company. Because without revenue, without bookings, without pipeline, there is no company. And that was a very interesting point in each of the three companies before Cloudera, where the CEO was able to do that. Once that's accomplished, then everything is about building pipeline. Every month, every quarter, every year, and it's not just sales, right? Everyone in the company has to be accountable and help drive that needle. Certainly in the early days, and even more importantly today where we are, if we don't have visibility more than one quarter out, more than 1+ quarter out, there's very little that we have control over. And so driving adoption of CRM becomes, just as important as building pipeline, because if you don't know where things are not working very well, certainly you're probably going to know the deals you're closing that month or that quarter, but if you can't see out a quarter or two, or even more, where you may have problems, you can't course correct. You can't begin to generate leads in the Asia Pacific region for a Q3 that you see you're going to fall off the cliff on if today there is no pipeline there. So it turns out that visibility becomes a very important thing, and you don't get it without adoption of the technology. And so when you start your team, you can't go into HP today and expect a sales rep to adopt all the moving parts, but in a smaller company, if everyone is bought into this culture and they realize they're a part of something bigger and they understand the importance of whether it's before hours or after hours, punching in what they need to punch in. So we have 100% visibility, not 93% visibility into not just the deal, but who the competitors are, who the partners may be that are involved. So that becomes important.
It's interesting. So I think that the lesson learned here for CROs of younger companies, as well as CEOs and founders, that don't just rely on the sales leader to build that winning culture. It's something that the entire organization has to be part of. So whether you're in support or in product or in marketing, everyone has to kind of sing to the same tune as far as building that winning revenue-oriented culture.
Yeah, I think one of the tragedies A lot of people talk about their months or their quarters being back-end loaded. And we, in all the companies I've worked for, we've had very talented executives and founders that we use in the sales cycle all the time. And when you get to the very end of a cycle, you don't want to wrap them up and have them, jumping on planes and doing Hail Marys in order to get deals in the last week over the fence. You want to be done with that so they can lead and they can guide the company and look out over the treetops. And in other companies that I've been at that haven't done as well, there was no kind of operating rhythm. The selling motions were not, there wasn't a lot of process and procedure around it, and it was kind of haphazard. And then you start missing and people start pointing fingers and it becomes an SS.
And so, just to build on that a little bit, Richard.
Let's build on that shit show.
Richard, given that, you've been obviously, you ran organizations, small and large. Now you're in a particular position where you have influence from a product perspective. As Chief Product Officer, how do you enable your CRO to become successful, building great products aside?
Yeah, I think about it as, it bounces off what you just said. It's not a function's job, it's the company's job. And what does the company need to be focused on? I think you need to be really clear on whose problem are you solving. If you're very clear on whose problem are you solving, you can ask the next question. What other ways do they have to solve this problem? Then you can ask the all-important question, which is why will they choose us to solve this problem? If you are laser focused on that, you have a common language that you can use for marketing, because marketing, digital marketing today, is just basically writing the RFP. You want them, when they do all their stuff, to come up and choose you. What do they care about? Who are you targeting? What is the reason why they should choose? Get them to think about, ask this question of all our competitors, because we know we're going to win. You know what sales is going to demo. You know who sales is going to target. What does it mean for product? It means product knows what to build. And if the engineers really understand that discussion and that winning story, then when they make their 1,000 decisions about this feature, that feature, shit, I can't get this in, they're going to be prioritizing what the SCs are going to demo, what the marketing guys are going to be teeing up, what the sales guys are going to talk about. So making sure that the entire company is aligned around these key personas and the winning story is the best way to make sure that the product organization is helping not just sales, I love sales too, but what you really want is customers to be successful. You want them to actually solve the problem, because that's how you then get the add-on sales and then the sort of the viral thing that happens thereafter. So everyone being locked on that. So when I'm in a sales and marketing capacity, I'm trying to nail that story. When I'm in a product-oriented capacity, I'm trying to nail that story and making sure I'm linking arms with my sales or marketing compatriots. If you stop somebody in the hall, and if I stop an engineer, you're working on something, and they cannot answer that question, it's like, stop right now. Like, stop right now. You and your team go figure out some customer to talk to until you are clear on that, because you are more than likely wasting our money if you're building something without that clarity.
That's fantastic. And John, on the receiving end, from sort of like a sales leadership perspective, what have you found that works well in terms of creating that common language with your product counterparts and marketing counterparts?
Well, it's the simple, collaboration, that goes along with it. But also, too, it's, when I think of a sales team with enablement or coming on board, the products, knowing the products that's the table stakes, right? Everybody will intuitively learn the product. Where I believe that the difference between a good and a great sales company is understanding the competitive differentiation, which gets back to, why us? And the other part too is what I've learned is, and this can go back maybe a million of years, right? As humans, we remember stories, right? And if you take a look, I had this funny experience where I used to always try to tell a story at sales kickoff. And I had one experience where I was trying to be able to correlate my daughter learning how to do a 5-speed transmission to trust. And then I went on for 45 minutes about to go to market. And I would see people 6 months after, hey, did your daughter Maxine learn how to drive? I'm like, yeah, but did you remember anything about to go to market? Like, not a thing. Sorry, don't remember anything, right? And so it's all about stories. And so when you want to be able to take a look in terms of how to collaborate the product, talk in terms of the customer validation, be able to have industry stories, be able to have outside validation from third parties. Because what you want to be able to do is say, I trust you. Right? I trust you, and you're de-risking my thought process by being able to tell these stories and understanding you know them as well as anybody. Someone told me, you have a couple of salient points in your career, and one of them was a customer will buy from you more from what you know of them than what you know of your product itself. And I do believe that there's maybe not to that extreme, but I do believe that there's a middle ground there that has to be done with product to be able to make the whole organization work.
So John, I want to stay with you for a second because you came to SAP recently, a couple months ago, I believe, and you were with FireEye before. So you came to pre-existing sales teams in place, systems in place, and you were asked to take it to the next level. I assume you have a wonderful playbook that is secret, and I was wondering if you would mind sharing some of your playbook.
Yeah, I wish I did. Every situation is unique, right? And I could talk about FireEye in terms of what I will do. That was a rocket ship, right? And it was a really exciting period of time for me, when I was with the company. And there was a couple of things that you notice right away. And I believe everyone in this room is facing this, which is this is Silicon Valley. This is innovation. If you think you have competitive differentiation, it will go away. And you have to be able to understand that competitors will catch up to you. So you have to be able to think differently in terms of where the company is going to go and what's going to be, to your point, it's like, why us? And what we decided to do is a couple of things. One is to be able to take the conversation to a higher level. We were not going to talk about security, right? We were going to talk in terms of how as a security as a service, and most importantly, going to the chief counsel, going to the board, talking about fiduciary responsibility, talking about brand damage, talking about in terms of how you're able then to have to do any sort of legal type of work, because the higher level folks are the ones that are going to really push it. What we found is the CISO, sometimes they didn't even have budget, and they could talk to us for days, right? But they couldn't exactly make the deal, right? So that was a really big kind of light that we had. The second one was much more global in nature, which is, where are you going to go globally, and what's realistic? We were never going to own the mid-market in Australia, right? The government in Singapore owns all the banks and owns most of the public industries. So you had to form partnerships and not do a big investment with your direct sales team. And so how do you be able to figure that out? And the last one is just kind of unique in terms of going from a services to more of a POVP. So it's much more around the go-to-market that you have to kind of think differently to be able to look in terms of how you accelerate revenue.
Thank you. And Lars, you mentioned, you've been with Cloudera for quite a while now, and congrats on a phenomenal ride, quite a rocket ship. When you were growing the team, and you were there for 4 or 5 years now, just about. What are some of the elements when you build the organization, when you design that machine that is now humming? What are some of the elements that you thought about in place in terms of one day we may want to go public, one day I need a machine that is going to be revving at that speed, but I'm at point A now and I want to get to point Z? It's like, but what were some of the design elements that you put in place?
Yeah, and there's a cool story here in that the CEO of the company I work for now was the CEO of the company I worked for before. So we had done this together once before. And I think the value I created for the previous company, ArcSight, was building what's called a sales development team. And my guess is most of you have heard the term SDR or ADR or LDR or BDR. But I know that's what he wanted me to build at the current company. And the reason is a quota-carrying salesperson, what they love doing more than anything else in the world is they love to sell, negotiate, and close. They like to leverage a comp plan in the multipliers and make money. What they can't stand doing and what they're no good at doing is prospecting, because that's what they used to do, or that's what they were forced to do. And this role that has grown up here in the Valley, and it's slowly getting out there, You're dedicating a non-quota carrying, they don't retire any quota. All they do all day long is they take all this really cool technology that we've all grown up around and they generate appointments. And if you look at the companies in the Valley that have grown lightning quick, they all have SDR teams. And it's a very difficult conversation to have with the VP of sales to try to help them understand, forget about having your reps do their own prospecting. And it's a little bit controversial, but if I were to become a CEO of a company, I would not expect my sales reps to do any prospecting. It takes too much time. They're no good at it, and they don't want to do it. I had a gentleman on my team that left. He was an SDR manager. He left to become SVP of worldwide sales for a company called Procore. And he took the SDR model and he turned it on its head. So instead of having one SDR aligned to 5 AEs and generating pipeline for them, he engineered it the other way. There are more SDRs than there are account executives. And that happens to be one of the fastest growing companies on the planet today. And it's because they're generating pipeline in the form of qualified meetings that their AEs, all they do all day long is sell, negotiate, and close. So for those of you that are founders and portfolio companies that are just getting off the ground, think about the non-quota carrying roles. They could absolutely be inside, and more companies that are getting funded are generating revenue through an inside selling model, quota carrying. But think about bifurcating the prospecting from the selling. You'll build pipeline, I mean, I can't say 2 or 3, but a hell of a lot faster.
We're going to touch on that in just a moment, because I do want to talk a little bit about onboarding and ramping. But Richard, you obviously, just like your 2 other panelists here, spend time in large organizations and small organizations. What are some of the lessons learned that a startup can learn from a tech titan? I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen done well that you say, that's a lesson learned that I want to take with me to a small company now?
For me, it's the one that's the most valuable is the confidence in going after a bigger deal. This only applies, of course, if you have a big ticket item.
Yeah.
But what people in larger companies do is sort of walk in with a swagger, like, of course we got this. And when I look at some small companies, the ones that don't do as well tend to almost be apologetic, like maybe we could do, they're a bit kind of conservative. Having this swagger about, I know you have this pain. Where do you want to get to? Sort of the challenger sale type approach. You're not asking for this. I know you need to get there. We know how to get you there. And then orchestrating kind of a larger deal, that can make a company. Because then you get a company, you get a champion who isn't just trying to meet an RFP. They're trying to drive a change. If they're trying to drive a change, they're putting their career on the line. They're going to really work with you now to make that change happen. And then you can grow your company around making that change occur. So that sense of acting like a big company when you're a little company, I like that in big company people. What I don't like about big company people and little companies is big company people are used to having like armies of people around and armies of help and all this stuff, right? And they have a unbelievable patience for BS. And you know, in a little company, you don't have time. Like, it's got to be done now. And if you don't have sort of ruthless qualification, like I don't think this is going to give me money, or I'm not going to get fed, then move on. So that ability to just decide, be ruthless, move, and get it done, or roll up your sleeves, and whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. I don't care whose job it is. That's something that if you're taking any big company person, you got to really make sure they can do that, because not every big company person wants to do that. It's demanding.
Yeah, I remember interviewing someone from a large company when I ran a small company, and I said, you know, you're used to being a general. You had an Air Force, and you had the Armored Division and the infantry, and here I'm going to give you a knife from plastic, probably, and ask you to go and hunt, which is obviously very, very different. John, any thoughts on that?
No, I think it was covered. I think really what that gets down to though is the hiring piece, right? In terms of being able to do the profile. And what I will say is there's nothing more important from a sales leadership than hiring the sales reps. And that is just something where I spend an inordinate amount of time, because if you get that right, everything else flows. If you don't, then it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, and it's hard, right? I know myself. I have know thyself is sometimes the hardest thing to do, and what I do is I'll make a decision on somebody in 45 seconds, right? And I have to fight that in me to be able to say, no, we have to be able to kind of do something a little bit broader. And there's a couple of things that I found to protect me from myself. One is I make every candidate do a presentation. Right? And the presentation is not about the company I'm working for. It could be about anything they want. It could be the company they're with, the company to back. But what I'm interested is, how do they open up the presentation? Do they talk about themselves, or do they talk about the customer? We'll have two different roles, one in the business, one in the technical end. Are they able to work with both, or do they over-rotate on one versus the other? We'll throw some obstacles. Will they pause to understand, right? Are they building empathy with me? And then are they closing correctly? And it's not about, do you want the order? Because that never happens, right? It's to ask for someone else in the organization to be able to talk to, because then that tells me there's a level of sophistication and a level of experience with this person that I'm going to be able to feel comfortable with. There's something else which is probably a little politically correct or incorrect, which is I do believe there is a profile that is different in each organization, but there is a profile of success within your sales team. And that's not to say different people can bring different things, because I do believe that, but there's a core that each rep on your team has in common. And I used to see this time and time again. And a lot of times where I had the most success is when I would find someone who is the first in their family to graduate from college. And I know that's completely odd, and probably I might be offending some people in this room, but there's a certain level of responsibility, a certain fight, and a certain edge that people like that kind of bring to the table. Sports, right? I don't care if they're captain of the chess team. I don't care if they're captain of the rugby team. All I want to know is, can you win? Can you lose? Can you operate as a team? That's really important. And the other question, which gets back to the never ever give up, is tell me the largest obstacle you had to overcome in your life. And if it's kind of like, oh, I missed my Q1 number, I'm like out. I want a gut-wrenching kind of like, you did something that no one else could do. Because if they overcame that, I know that they're going to be just fine on the sales team, right? So those are some of the things.
Oh, great tips. I mean, really, really good advice. Thank you. And I want to switch gears a little bit, and maybe Lars, start with you. Talk a little bit about, we talked about hiring, talk about onboarding and ramping, which is something that obviously, unfortunately, in this business, you have quite a churn sometimes within the sales organization, and you bake in some assumption as far as how quickly can I get someone up to speed and productive and kind of like making their quotas. What are some of the best practices that you've applied in terms of, I've hired someone and I'm now working quickly to get them up to speed and become super productive?
Yeah, it's relevant. When I joined Cloudera, we had 11 quota-carrying reps. At the end of the next year, we had 50. And at the end of the following year, we had 150. And so to go from 11 to 150, you have to implement enablement, onboarding, ramping, training. You can no longer rely on the heroes that kind of have been there. You gotta hire very quickly, and you gotta manage a bunch of B players. And you have to manage people that are C up to B, and hopefully B up to A. But there's a lot of those people. So we've invested a lot in onboarding, sales enablement, sales efficiency, sales effectiveness. There's those three terms that are thrown out all over the place. I would say that the biggest takeaway for me in the last year was when it wasn't even my idea, but we have a global sales enablement team that is responsible for inside sales, outside sales, marketing's involved. But I had an opportunity from one of my SDRs to join the sales enablement team and become the dedicated sales enablement person just for the SDR role. They use anywhere from 6 to 8 different tools every day, whether it's LinkedIn Navigator or Lean Data or Outreach. or Bombora. There's a lot of moving parts. And instead of them just getting the videos, the training videos and the onboarding, week of onboarding, I have a guy dedicated to go to all the different inside sales centers around the world and constantly work and get them. I want one of those people for each of our sales segments as well. So it's not just creating the function of sales enablement, it's actually specializing it for each of the roles, because every role, whether it's strategic sales, enterprise sales, commercial sales, public sector sales, inside sales, SDR, there's different rhythms, there's different things they have to be aware of. And that, for me, I've gotten more mileage out of this one person for a group of 60 SDRs than I have in my career.
That's great. And, did I mention that we're an investor in Lean Data? Evan is here. I want to open up for questions in a second. I just want to ask you one last sort of like high-level question in terms of reflecting on your respective careers, which is, what do you wish someone would have told you 15 years ago, 20 years ago when you started this journey? What are the things that you wish you would have told yourself knowing what you know now? Maybe Rich, I'll start with you.
So one of the things that's hit me reasonably recently, which I wish I'd had more clearly in my head earlier, is I used to think that the perfect customer was somebody who was out looking for what I sold. And then there are people you sort of fall off of perfection from there. And I now don't see it that way at all. What I'm actually looking for is somebody who has fight, they have vested their personal win in making a change. And then I want to believe that I'm going to be their best vehicle to make that change. Now it's going to be harder for me to get in because they're going to be skeptical. You know, it's going to be more of the sales process is going to be harder. But when I convince that person, they have all the oomph to drive the organization. And then when they are successful, they're going to be a fantastic evangelist. And that's how I grow a business. And that's, again, I've referred to challenger sales. It's a bit more of the challenger mentality. But I used to think of those as sort of bummer. Okay, I can get this deal, but what a pain in the ass it is to have to go through all these obstacles. And now I'm looking for that profile.
So maybe I'll answer that in terms of advice that I wish I learned earlier in my career that was really helpful. And it was embarrassing actually, but it was one of those moments, sometimes the hardest news is the ones that help you the most. I was being coached by a board member and he asked me how I ran my 90-day cycle. And I went through the entire 90 days, and I was emphasizing, the close and the executive sponsorship and everything else. And at the end, he goes, "You're offering no value to the company because you're running a sales team like every other CRO out here in the Valley." And he goes, "If you want to differentiate yourself, you got to figure out what you do the first 7 weeks because that's the hard part." He goes, "How do you get your team in position the first 7 weeks because that's really where the play is written. And then all you're doing is performing the next 7 weeks." And I really took that to heart, and and it's something that I live by today because I see the difference that it makes. Everything in terms of what are the targets? Because what is it? We're doing a lot of things, but at a high level, besides getting in the trenches, we need to be the guardian of our reps' time. And I couldn't agree more in terms of looking at how to leverage a different role to be able to kind of get leads, because that's what we all have. We have 90 days, so many of hours, and the winning sales team uses that time more effectively. And so you got to be able to lead your team in terms of where you get the most return on that time, because there are 20 different ways there's dilution in terms of productivity. And so when I look into if I had to do it all over again, I wish I knew that the first 7 weeks that really matter, and I wish I had the philosophy that I'm the guardian of my sales team's time.
Thank you. Lars?
Yeah, this is not meant to bring anyone down, but it's relevant. So I started my high-tech career 22 years ago, and at the time I was engaged. And throughout my career, right, I got married, I had 2 kids, I moved a couple different places. Today I'm a single father. And part of the narrative has to do with my focus and attention on the companies that I was helping, the travel, the late nights, the weekends, all the things that we all do every day, every week, every month. It's hard to do this job. It's harder to do this job, way harder to do this job working for a venture-backed technology startup than it is if you're working at HP. I know because I worked there after the acquisition of ArcSight. So what I tell people coming out of college, many of whom I hire in 3 different markets, I make sure that they understand that if they're searching for work-life balance, there are other places where that exists more. It doesn't mean that we don't strive at where I am today or the other companies where I've been. It's just hard. And you have to be driven by wanting the craziness that we wake up to every day. And if you want it, make sure you understand what you have at home and that you connect and you open up to those people at home, regardless of whether they're family, friends, kids, spouse, because it sucks to lose something like that. It's probably the biggest loss I've ever had. And, there's a story, but this is part of it. So anyway, go home and tell your spouse you love them tonight.
Thank you for sharing this with us. Let's open up. We have a couple minutes for questions. So please, yeah, Jim. If you don't mind just introducing yourself.
Sure. Jim Wilson with the venture capital firm. We have a number of our portfolio companies here. So I've experienced expanding to international markets, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on both when and your philosophies on when to do it and when not to do it. I think a lot of companies in the room are at some part of that stage. I also can speak from personal experience that technology and the way we market has changed such that it used to be you can't go to Europe because you can't hire someone. Well, now you get inbound leads from Europe all the time, and so it's easier to be tempted to do it or not. And I'd just be interested in your thoughts on timing and signals.
Maybe I'll take the first shot at that. I think you should stay in North America as long as you can. It's the largest market. The early adopters are in North America. Very few companies have been able to extract the full value, right? And so I think there's a trap of going international too early and too fast. But if you could see whether it's the subsidiary locations in North America that are starting to kind of come into it. If you start seeing other customers moving to other companies that have large international operations and they're requesting to come with you, those are really, really strong signs. The challenge that you have that you got to be really sensitive to is no different when a startup is in the A and B series, which is know your customer. This place is know your market, right? In Europe, there's 3 big markets. You can't own Europe, right? It's basically UK, Germany, and France, right? And then if you go out of that realm because there's this one big customer, it's not going to be a good return on your investment. If you go to Japan, you have to realize that you're not going to get a return probably for 2 to 3 years. It's a multi-level, channel-oriented go-to-market. It's built on trust. It's a different type of way to sell. Do not open your Asia Pac office in Sydney. I hope I didn't insult anybody, but there's a tendency to say they speak English, there's cultural alignment, and then you realize they're 11 hours from the largest market. And then eventually that kind of fails as well. And just think in terms of where should you go direct and where should you go partner or indirect, because that will also have a large portion on your profit. And I would stay away from Latin America as long as you possibly can.
Let's squeeze in one more question and go ahead.
My name is Oner Rubin. I'm the head of sales development for a pre-series A startup called Right Fund. So my question is kind of in light of your talking about sales development. So when sales development reps are coming in at the earliest stages, when you don't know exactly what your qualification criteria is or who you're targeting and how you should target your value prop, any advice for building an effective sales development team or the value sales development can contribute at those earliest stages?
Yeah, I'll start that one. So as soon as you can, Once you get 2 SDRs on a team, you have to start thinking about what other roles you might be able to create, because very quickly, if you're a company that enables an SDR, within 5 or 6 months, they are going to start getting headhunted legitimately by other companies because they know that if they come from your company, they've done all this stuff. The jump from SDR to quota-carrying account executive at my current company is way too far. So what I've done over the last couple of years is I've created 2 other completely different organizations. One is called renewal sales, and the other one is called corporate sales, which is a kind of quota-carrying inside sales team. And within 12 to 24 months, if there's performance and there's culture and teamsmanship, they can graduate. And the really cool thing at our last sales kickoff, there have been 8 or 9 SDRs that have been through this program. They're still in their 20s, but they are now graduating into quota carrying, carrying $1 million plus bags, competing with 15, 20, 25-year account execs and smoking them because they now understand how to use all this technology. And so we're now rethinking the profile of what a successful quota-carrying account executive is, because we're having success with people that have spent 2, 3, 4 years inside, but they're fully ramped when they get off, when they go into the field. So start thinking about that, because an SDR, regardless of where they are, they want to move into, if they want to go into sales, they want to move into quota carrying. Some people realize out of college, maybe this is not my bag, and we've graduated SDRs into marketing, into enablement, into operations, and now all of a sudden we're pollinating SDRs into the rest of the company, and they bring energy and enthusiasm, and it's really cool thing that's happening right now.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but obviously people are welcome to stick around, and we'll have a break and we can chat some more. Lars, Richard, John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for
Appreciate the
inviting me.
insight.